My name is Rachel Morgan, and I am 29 years old. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment my life split into before and after. I was 16, full of teenage energy, and completely unaware that one stupid prank would change everything. My brother had always loved making me the butt of his jokes, but I never imagined one of them could destroy me. That day, he thought it would be funny to push me off the deck railing in our backyard. I remember the air rushing past me, the split second of disbelief, and then the crack of my body hitting the ground. Pain seared through my back and legs like fire, but when I screamed, all I heard was laughter. His, and worse, my parents'. I couldn't walk normally after that fall. Every step felt wrong, heavy, as if my own body was betraying me. I begged my parents to take me to the hospital, but they waved me off with tired smiles. "You're being dramatic," my mother said, her voice sharper than the pain in my spine. The betrayal cut deeper than the injury itself. I wanted comfort, reassurance, someone to tell me I'd be okay. Instead, I got eye rolls and dismissive sighs. My brother wore his snark like a crown, proud of the chaos he caused, while I was left struggling to even stand. Soon, I learned to shut my mouth. Each time I mentioned my pain, my parents' faces hardened. My father even joked once, "If she's this good at pretending, maybe she'll be an actress one day." Their words weren't just dismissals, they were daggers. So I suffered in silence. At night, I lay in bed with tears slipping into my pillow, my legs twitching uncontrollably. I bit my lips so hard to stop myself from crying out that sometimes I tasted blood. My body was screaming for help, but my family refused to listen. Walking through school halls became torture. My limp grew more noticeable, and whispers followed me. "What's wrong with her?" kids asked, though my brother quickly answered for me. "She's faking it." His words stuck like glue, and soon everyone believed him. I tried to laugh along, to play it off like a joke, but every step was agony. Teachers thought I was clumsy, friends thought I was shy, and no one knew the truth. School should have been an escape, but instead, it became just another stage for my humiliation. One night, I tried to get out of bed, and my legs simply gave out. I crashed onto the floor, unable to move, my cheek pressed against the cold wood. I stayed there for hours, too afraid to call for help, too tired of being mocked. It was in that moment I realized the truth. My family wasn't going to save me. My pain wasn't going to magically vanish. Something inside me was broken, and pretending otherwise was only destroying me further. After weeks of begging, I finally convinced my parents to take me to a doctor. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the day someone believed me. But the moment we walked into the clinic, my hopes started crumbling. "She exaggerates everything," my mother told the doctor with a forced laugh. My father nodded in agreement, while my brother sat in the corner, smirking. The doctor gave me a quick check, tapped my knees with a reflex hammer, and said maybe it was just stress. My parents walked out smug. I walked out shattered. After that, I stopped asking for help. Every time I even hinted at pain, my mother's glare warned me to stay quiet. Instead, I became my own detective. I spent nights on the library computer, typing in symptoms with trembling hands. What I found terrified me. Spinal injuries, nerve damage, permanent paralysis. The words on the screen seemed like predictions of my future. But how could I convince anyone when my family already decided I was just dramatic? My silence became my prison. My brother didn't let me forget what he had done. He mimicked my limp at family gatherings, dragging his leg and laughing while everyone chuckled. "Look, it's Rachel," he'd say, his voice dripping with mockery. Every time they laughed at me, something inside me hardened. I stopped sitting with them at meals. I stopped talking in the car. It was safer to disappear into the background than to be the family's favorite joke. 2 years blurred together in a haze of pain. I became an expert at pretending. I smiled at school, laughed with friends, and hid the way my legs trembled whenever I stood too long. At home, I locked myself in my room, crying into my pillow so no one could hear.
But the symptoms grew worse. Sometimes my legs went completely numb. Other times, sharp shocks of pain jolted me awake at night. Deep down, I knew this wasn't something I could just walk off. My body was breaking, and nobody cared. It all came crashing down one morning at school. I was walking through the crowded hallway when suddenly my legs gave out. Books flew everywhere as I hit the floor, unable to move. Gasps filled the hall. Teachers rushed to me, their faces pale with shock. My brother stood among the crowd, frozen in silence for once. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't me acting dramatic. For the first time, everyone saw the truth, and there was no hiding from it anymore. The ambulance ride felt like a blur of sirens and fear. I lay on the stretcher, staring at the ceiling, my body refusing to move the way I begged it to. For once, my parents didn't laugh. They sat in silence, pale and nervous. At the hospital, doctors crowded around me. They didn't roll their eyes, they didn't call me dramatic, they looked worried. That alone broke me inside. If strangers could see my pain, why hadn't my own family? The doctors ordered an MRI, sliding me into the machine that sounded like a giant clanging drum. I held my breath, staring at the cold white ceiling, praying someone would finally tell me what was wrong. When they pulled me out, the doctor's face was grim. He didn't need to say much, just a few words that confirmed what I had known all along. There's spinal damage, serious damage. The room went silent after the doctor's words. My parents froze, their excuses collapsing in an instant. My brother shifted in his seat, suddenly uncomfortable without his usual smirk. The doctor looked at them sharply. "This isn't new. This didn't happen overnight. She's been living with this for years. Why didn't you bring her in sooner?" My parents had no answer. For the first time, they looked small, cornered by the truth. At home, later that night, my mother tried to justify herself. "We thought you were fine. We didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing." My father muttered, "You're tough. We thought you'd push through." But their guilt didn't erase the years of suffering. It didn't erase the nights I cried alone and the humiliation of being laughed at. Their sudden concern felt hollow. Too little, far too late. Over the next week, specialists explained the damage. Nerves compressed, bones shifted, a spinal injury that had only worsened with time. Words like paralysis risk and long-term therapy echoed in the room. For once, my family couldn't interrupt, couldn't call me dramatic. The doctors' voices drowned out theirs. And in that silence, I realized something. The people who should have protected me had nearly destroyed me. Doctors started asking questions my family didn't want to answer. When did this injury happen? Why wasn't she brought in sooner? Has she had any treatment before? Their eyes shifted from me to my parents, waiting.
My mother's voice cracked with weak excuses. She never said it was that bad. But the doctors had already seen my records, or rather, the lack of them. 2 years of silence, 2 years of neglect.
Their silence was becoming evidence. A hospital social worker came to my bedside. She didn't talk to my parents. She spoke directly to me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Rachel, has anyone ever ignored your medical needs before? Has anyone stopped you from getting help? I hesitated. The old fear of being called dramatic clawed at me. But then I remembered the nights I'd lain on the floor paralyzed while my parents dismissed my cries. For the first time, I said the words out loud. Yes, my family ignored everything. That evening, the police showed up at the hospital. My brother sat in the corner, his usual arrogance gone. For the first time, he wasn't laughing. He was pale, biting his nails as officers spoke quietly with the doctors. I watched him squirm and a strange calm washed over me. The prank that once gave him power was unraveling his life. He couldn't laugh it off anymore, because now the world knew what he'd done. The police asked my parents to step outside. I could hear muffled voices through the door, questions, accusations, my mother's shaky voice trying to defend them. My father raised his voice once, but it broke off quickly. When they returned, their faces were drained of color. They weren't the powerful figures I had grown up fearing. They looked like scared strangers, trapped in a truth they couldn't control. The hospital filed an official report of medical neglect. Suddenly, my life was evidence in a case. The MRI scans, the school records of me collapsing, the years without medical visits, they all told a story my family couldn't deny. And as terrifying as it was, I felt something new stirring inside me. Relief. For the first time in years, someone believed me. For the first time, my pain mattered. The hospital report triggered something I never expected, a formal case file with my name on it. Detectives asked for school reports, medical history, even statements from teachers who had seen me limp and collapse. My entire life was being pieced together as evidence. At first, it felt overwhelming. My pain turned into paperwork. My humiliation turned into testimonies. But there was power in it, too. Every document was proof that I hadn't been lying all those years. I'll never forget the first time I entered the courtroom. The walls were tall and cold, but they felt safer than my own home had ever been. My parents sat across the room, avoiding my eyes. My brother kept his head down, no smirk left. The judge's voice was steady as she read the charges: neglect, child endangerment, reckless harm. Each word hit the room like thunder. And for the first time, my family wasn't laughing. They were trembling. When it was my turn to speak, my voice shook. I described the night of the prank, the pain that followed, the years of being dismissed and mocked. Every word felt like reopening an old wound. But as I looked up, I saw the jury leaning in, listening. They weren't rolling their eyes. They weren't dismissing me. My truth, once buried under years of denying, finally had a place to be heard.
My parents' lawyer tried to paint me as an overdramatic teenager who had exaggerated her pain, but the MRI images were undeniable. The medical expert spoke with certainty. My injuries were real, and the neglect had made them worse. Their defense cracked under the weight of facts. Every time their lawyer tried to twist the story, the evidence snapped it back into place. For once, it wasn't me versus their words. It was truth versus lies. When the court adjourned that day, I walked, or rather wheeled, out of the courtroom with a strange mix of exhaustion and strength. I was drained, but I wasn't broken anymore. For years, my family had controlled the narrative, convincing the world I was dramatic, weak, or attention-seeking. But now, the truth was louder than their lies. And this was only the beginning. News of the case spread quickly through our extended family. Aunts and uncles called my parents furious that
family business was being dragged into court. To them, reputation mattered more than my suffering. Some cousins messaged me in secret, saying they believed me but couldn't say it out loud. Their silence stung almost as much as my parents' betrayal. Blood ties, I learned, don't always mean loyalty. Outside the courthouse, neighbors and old family friends whispered as I passed. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. How could she take her own parents to court? I overheard one woman mutter. For a moment, shame crept in. But then I remembered the nights I lay paralyzed on my bedroom floor, unheard and ignored. This wasn't betrayal, it was survival. The day my brother testified was the day I truly saw fear in his eyes. He tried to downplay the prank, calling it a stupid joke, but the prosecutor pressed harder. Did he know the risks? Did he see me in pain afterward? His stammering answers betrayed him. The smirk he had worn for years was gone, replaced with sweat on his forehead. For once, the truth stripped away his power. When my parents finally took the stand, they cried. My mother wept about doing her best, while my father insisted he didn't realize how serious it was. But their tears didn't move me. I had begged them for help. I had cried in front of them night after night, and they had chosen to laugh. Their sudden tears in court weren't about me. They were about saving themselves. After one of the hearings, a journalist approached me. "Your story could help others," she said gently. I didn't know what to say. For so long, I had been silenced, ignored, buried under lies. Now, people wanted to hear me. That night, I realized my fight wasn't just about justice in the courtroom. It was about reclaiming my voice. My story wasn't just my pain anymore. It was a weapon, and it was finally being heard. The journalist's words echoed in my head. Your story could help others. For years, my voice had been dismissed inside my own home. But now, strangers leaned in when I spoke. It felt strange, almost dangerous, to be heard. I started writing everything down. My memories, my pain, even the nights when I thought I wouldn't survive. Putting my story on paper gave me power. It wasn't just suffering anymore. It was evidence, testimony, and, most importantly, truth. The court assigned me a therapist, and for the first time, I had a safe space to unravel everything. She didn't look away when I described my parents' laughter. She didn't call me dramatic. She simply nodded and said, "That wasn't your fault." Hearing those words broke something inside me, but in the best way. I realized I had been carrying guilt that never belonged to me. That was the day I stopped apologizing for my pain. During another hearing, new evidence was revealed. School nurses had reported my limp years earlier, but my parents had ignored calls for follow-ups. The prosecutor showed the reports like puzzle pieces, snapping into place. My parents shifted uncomfortably as the truth stacked against them. Their mask of loving parents was crumbling in front of everyone. And for the first time, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. The case split our town in two. Some people supported me, furious at my parents for letting things get this far. Others defended them, insisting I was exaggerating to ruin their lives. Walking into the grocery store felt like stepping into a war zone of whispers. But I held my head higher now. I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for my life. One night, I shared a piece of my story online. I didn't name names, but I wrote about what it felt like to be ignored by the very people meant to protect you. Within hours, messages poured in from strangers who had lived through the same thing. For the first time, I saw my pain connect to something larger than me. My story wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing others that silence doesn't have to be permanent. During the trial, a former neighbor unexpectedly appeared. She testified that she had witnessed my brother pushing me on the deck years earlier and had reported it to my parents at the time. Their faces went pale as the witness recounted every detail. For the first time, I saw the scale of their deception through someone else's eyes. The walls my parents had built around themselves began to crumble. On the stand, my brother finally admitted the prank had gone too far. He stammered, trying to explain it as a joke gone wrong, but his words rang hollow. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. He couldn't take back the pain, but he had finally acknowledged the truth. That alone gave me power. The judge leaned forward, addressing the court. Neglect is not just a word, it is action or inaction that harms a child. The evidence in this case is clear. Her voice echoed in the room, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. For years, I had feared being labeled dramatic or weak. Now the law itself was validating my pain. The weight of silence I carried for so long finally lifted, if only slightly.
As the trial continued, I received letters and messages from people I'd never met. They shared stories of similar abuse, of being ignored by family, of finally finding their voice. It was overwhelming to see how many people related to my experience. I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a beacon of resilience for others. One night, after a long day in court, I sat alone in my apartment. The house was quiet, yet I felt louder than ever. Every tear, every scream, every lonely night had led me to this point. I didn't just survive my family's neglect, I had begun transforming it into strength. And though the trial was far from over, I knew one thing: I would never be silenced again. Days of testimony and evidence had left everyone on edge. The courtroom was tense, with whispers passing between spectators as the final arguments were presented. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My parents avoided my gaze, while my brother fidgeted nervously. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't pleading anymore. I was waiting for justice to speak. During a break, I walked through the empty courthouse halls alone. Every step echoed the years I had spent hiding my pain, pretending everything was fine, and fearing disbelief. But this time, my steps weren't heavy with fear. They were firm with resolve. I had faced my past, and I was finally standing tall, not for anyone else, but for myself. When the judge called my parents to testify again, their facade finally cracked. They admitted ignoring my cries for help, claiming ignorance and fear of public embarrassment. Their words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't feel satisfaction or revenge, just relief. The truth was out. For the first time, my parents' denial couldn't erase the reality of what they had done. The verdict arrived, and the courtroom went silent. My brother and parents were found guilty of neglect and reckless endangerment. The judge spoke of accountability, consequences, and the lifelong impact of their actions. I sat quietly, letting the words sink in. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition of truth, validation of pain, and the beginning of healing. After the trial, I started physical therapy with renewed determination. Each painful step reminded me that recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. I also began speaking at support groups, sharing my story with others who had been ignored or dismissed. For the first time, my experience had transformed into something powerful: hope for myself and inspiration for others. After the trial, I moved into my own apartment, a space that was completely mine.
No judgments, no mockery, no fear, just walls I could call home, and a life I could control. Every small decision, from cooking my meals to decorating my space, felt like reclaiming freedom. For the first time, I realized independence wasn't just about living alone. It was about standing unshaken in my own truth.
I began volunteering at organizations for victims of family neglect and abuse. Speaking to others who had suffered in silence reminded me that my story could prevent someone else from enduring years of dismissal and pain. Every tear shared and every hand I held reinforced a new truth. My trauma didn't define me, it had given me a purpose. My pain had transformed into power, and for the first time, I felt truly proud of my journey. As my advocacy grew, I found unexpected allies. Friends, former classmates, and even some distant family members reached out with apologies and support, validating experiences I had once thought I had to endure alone. Their encouragement reminded me that healing doesn't happen in isolation. Connection, understanding, and shared stories became the new foundation of my life, stronger than the betrayal I had survived. Years of therapy, advocacy, and rebuilding had changed me. I no longer carried the weight of their laughter or disbelief. Every scar, every memory, every painful step had become a testament to my resilience. Standing in front of a crowd at a support group, I realized I had become stronger than the people who once tried to break me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, using my voice to protect and empower others. The final confrontation with my family came quietly through legal channels and firm boundaries. I forgave them, not to excuse their actions, but to release the grip of anger that had tethered me to the past. With my life fully reclaimed, I looked forward. I traveled, pursued my passions, and built relationships with people who valued and believed me. The pain that once defined me had transformed into power, purpose, and freedom. Proof that even the deepest betrayals can lead to the strongest victories.